Hello artist! This week it's all about pottery. I hope you've already had a moment to watch our video with orchid artist Scott Schaffer. He showed us how he used his potter's wheel and clay to make this beautiful vase. Potters often make things that we would use as vessels, plates, cups, bowls, vases, like we would put flowers in. And it's not the only things they make, but a lot of times when we think about potters, we think about them in these terms of making these useful vessels out of clay. This week we're going to be making our own. I doubt you have a potter's wheel at home. I know I don't. If you do, go out and make something on it for your art project this week. You have my permission. That would be fabulous. We probably don't have clay at home either. So we're going to get creative this week with the supplies that we're going to use to form our cup. We're going to need paper, 2 or 3 sheets of paper at least, please. It can be regular copy paper. That's what I'm using today. You want something kind of lightweight. Even newspaper would be great for this lesson today. Paper, scissors, crayons, or whatever coloring supply you have, and glue. This week you will need liquid glue. This isn't going to work well with a glue stick, unfortunately. I tried it. It was just really frustrating. So regular washable glue would be ideal. If you don't have glue, you can substitute flour and water mixed together. I'll put a picture here. It makes kind of a paste. This would be something like that you could use for Mod Podge or use for paper mache. So it's just flour, and you add just a little water until it gets, I like it kind of thick, but until it gets kind of thick. So glue or this flour and water paste. Grab those supplies, come back, and I'll show you how we're going to get started. All right, so you have your supplies. Maybe you're using the flour and water or the glue. We're going to go ahead, we'll set this aside for just a moment. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do here as we get started. So in our video with Mr. Schaffer, he used clay to build a vessel. And something kind of like this cup is what we're going to be making this week. If we had clay and we wanted to use clay, you could do it even without a potter's wheel. They do something called a coil. So here's some molding clay. This is air dry clay. It's a little different than the clay that Mr. Schaffer was using. But we can do this, you've probably done this before with Play-Doh maybe even. You can roll out the clay into a long coil like this, and then you can begin to form your vessel with it. I'll show you a picture here of a coil pot. So here you can see all the layers of this coil that have been put together. They also use something, we're going to be using glue today and paper, but here they were using clay and something that's called a slip, which is a little bit of that watered down clay that just acts as a binding agent or a glue to hold this pot together. So they would put a row of a coil and then they would mark it just a little bit, just to rough it up a little, and then they would paint this slip over the top, and then they would add another coil to it, and they would keep building it up. And some of these can get really intricate and beautiful. Here's a couple of examples of how they can add design to it. The insides can be smoothed out so that they're smooth on the inside. There's also something called a pinch pot, where you take your clay and you simply pinch it together to form your pot. So it could be something like that too. We're going to be doing a little bit of both of those techniques today with our paper. So instead of clay, we're using paper. Instead of a slip, we're going to be using glue. Grab those things handy and let's get started. With our paper, go ahead and grab one sheet. We're going to start by making this saucer or this bottom part for our piece to sit on. So fold your paper in half. I have mine horizontal, side to side. Fold it in half. And you can take your scissors and just cut it down the middle. I actually already have a half a piece over here, so I'm going to grab that really quick. And then decide how big you want this saucer to be. Here would be my recommendation. I kind of guesstimated about how big a square would be. I added my pattern and then I cut it out in the shape of a circle, and that way my pattern went all the way to the edges. So let's start here with our square, and I want you to add a pattern. Think about something kind of fun. This one has a plaid underneath it. Think polka dots, zigzags, shapes like squares, those kind of things in the bottom. I'm going to do stripes on this one. Oh, there we have our base. Okay, it's your choice. You can cut it into the shape of a circle. You can leave it in the size of a square right now. I think I'll go ahead, I'll cut it in a circle again. I'm just simply kind of cutting these corners off. Notice that I keep my scissors straight and I turn my paper. Okay, not a perfect circle. If you wanted a perfect circle, you could most definitely trace the shape of a circle, maybe a small bowl on there if you wanted. But this works for me. All right, next we're gonna make our coils. I showed you how we would make that with the clay that was laid out. We're gonna be making it with paper. Here's how that looks. Grab your sheet of paper. I'm actually gonna just do 2 at one time because we're gonna need more than 10 of these. I'm gonna cut strips of paper. There's really no wrong size to do here, but I would say about 1 inch. You don't have to measure. You can kind of guesstimate again about what you think 1 inch would be. I'm just going to cut these strips of paper. All right, we're going to start by making coils, a lot like I made the coil with the clay, and I rolled it out and made the long strand of clay that we would use to start forming a vessel. We're going to be making coils out of paper. This is a lot like how a potter would actually have to work with their clay to get it started. Mr. Schaffer showed us how he would center it on the wheel, and he worked with the clay to make sure that it stayed in the center of his potter's wheel. And a lot of times in pottery, getting started is a big thing. To start with a really good foundation is important. So that's what we're starting with today. So we're going to take our little slips of paper and we're going to fold them. This doesn't have to be exact. I'm just folding it up a little at a time, making kind of a flat coil. And you could leave it flat like this if you wanted to for the next part, but I think it's a little better if you kind of smush it a little here. I'm just squeezing it, giving it a little more texture to it. It's making it a little more rounded. You could even twist your paper like this, and that just helps to give it a little bit more of a coil shape. If it rips, that's okay. We're going to be using glue in a little while. So just give it a little twist. We want to make about 15 of these, all right? So I'm going to put some music on for us. Go ahead, and if you need to, you can pause the video and work with me here. Let's fold and twist. All right, so we got about 15 of these guys. We've got our saucer for the bottom and we got our glue. It's time to start the base. We're gonna start in just the center and we're gonna make just the bottom of our cup, and we're gonna decide how big we want the base of our cup to be. We'll make our base that high or that wide, and then we'll start to build the walls up. So grab your glue and go ahead and add a circle to the middle. I kind of like to fill it all the way in. You know, a lot of times we dot, not a lot. This time we're going to kind of fill it all in. Use a little more glue than we normally would use for this. If you're using the flour and the water paste, just take some on your hand and kind of make the circle about the size that you want in the middle. Grab one of your coils, and we're going to start in the very center. And I'm actually going to do this before I lay it down. I'm going to start on one end, and I'm just going to start to roll it very tightly into a little ball here. All right, so this is going to be, see how it's getting wider as we roll it together? This is going to be the center of our cup. And it's okay if it unrolls a little. I'm pressing down as I put it in. Like with clay, we're going to have to kind of bend the paper to do what we want it to do. By the way, did I mention this is going to be a little messy? All right, so I'm just spinning it around, pressing it together. Every once in a while, you might have to hold it for just a few minutes maybe count to 10, maybe not a few minutes, a few seconds. Count to 10, that'll help it to get a good stick to it. Just keep adding coils until you have it as wide as you want your cup to be. You can kind of shape it as you would clay to get that shape that you're wanting. Make it a little more circular. Let's see, I think this is my 4th coil. I'm adding to make my base. I think that's pretty good. Hold this for just a few seconds so that it stays. All right, so there I have the base of my cup. I'm going to start building the sides up now. Here, I'll take these out so you can see. I think you can see inside this one. You can see the coils as they were. All right, I'm going to add the glue to the top, just along the outside edge. There is no specific way that it has to be done. You'll kind of get a feel for it. That's part of what it would be like if we were working with clay right now. You just kind of have to get a feel for how it's going to go. So I'm going to start putting my first layer on top, and I'm bending my paper and I'm pressing it into that line of glue. And again, every so often I might have to hold it for a few seconds to make it really want to stick, and I can start to kind of pinch it as well. The glue is going to help the paper be a little easier to form. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Each layer will get to come back and shape it all together again. If you have extra glue on your hands, I like to kind of rub it off on the paper. I'm going to add, each time I'm going to add a layer of glue, just like a potter would add the slip in between each layer of a coil pot. We're adding glue, our binding, our sticky element. You might find, like mine is not, it's not stuck enough not to move around on me yet, and that is okay. That's part of it. You're not doing anything wrong. Just give it a minute, maybe hold it for a few seconds. I keep saying minute, but I mean seconds, sorry. Give it a few seconds. Let the glue kind of connect a little more. All right, I'm going to add another layer. If you're using the flour and water mixture, then you're just going to be adding that probably with your fingers just on the top, each layer. You could also, if you're using the flour and water, you could dip your paper into it and then rub it off, kind of like I'm rubbing the glue on it right now. That would give it some good sticking power as well. All right, I'm going to just hold that layer there for a minute. I'm okay with the fact that it's not super round right now because I know that I'm going to be able to continue to pinch it and form it as it's drying. So right now our goal is to build the walls up, and then after they've sat for just a few seconds, then we'll be able to form it a little more. Okay, I've built this up about as high as it's going to go, I think, for now. And this last one's still kind of getting sticky here. I'm going to grab the edges of my pot and I'm just flattening them, just kind of helping them stick. It's okay if the paper sticks to you a little as you go along. Just encourage it to go back where it belongs there. Messy process, just like a potter. If you noticed in our video, Mr. Schaffer, his hands would get the clay on them and he would rinse them off a little here and there. It's okay, this is messy art. You could probably even, like I can make mine a little taller just by squeezing and pinching the paper up a little higher. I do want to add a handle to the side. And I have it kind of go over. I'm just making a little bit of a hook. Have it go over the edge. And then I'm just going to cut off what I don't need. There's so much glue here that I can just stick it to the side, I think. Now my cup has a handle. Oops. Handle to the side. So it actually becomes pretty hard. I mean, this is impressively hard, enough that you can hold the crayons up without falling over. You definitely wouldn't want to eat a meal out of this. There'd be no good way to clean it, but you have formed a coil pot or a coil cup out of paper. Very nice job. If you wanted to get fancy, you could come back. You could add, if you have some colorful construction paper or tissue paper, you could add a stripe to it. I like mine bone china white is what I would call this. Oh, I am so impressed. Thank you guys for hanging with me. This was a messy project, but I hope you had fun with it. I definitely think it's kind of cool. Something different to do, right? A little chance to do some sculpting. I look forward to seeing what you do. Let me know if you do this one, if you give it a go. I would love to hear how it goes and what you end up with. All right, I'll see you next week back here in the art room.